What's going on, you lovely people? Welcome back to Robski Football. My name's Jacob, and today I'm bringing you the Michael Carrick "Should He Stay, Should He Go" video. Of course, we're now into the last two games of the season. United's destiny has been sealed in the sense of Champions League qualification. But today, obviously, I wanted to go in a bit more of a deeper dive into the situation surrounding Michael Carrick and Manchester United, and where do we go from here? What should we expect, obviously, in the last few weeks of the season, and obviously going into the summer break and the World Cup, etc., etc. So when Ruben Amorim was eventually sacked as Man United boss, there was a bit of a media merry-go-round regarding who would it be, albeit until the end of the season, to take over from Amorim. Obviously, murmurs of United being in talks with ex-players, I should say, like Van Nistelrooy and Solskjaer for a second stint. Obviously, Michael Carrick was in that conversation, but I think as United fans, I mean, me personally, I wasn't too thrilled with the options we had, albeit I wasn't surprised given the time it was in the season and the options that we would normally go for being available or not being available. But obviously, Carrick, I guess, in retrospect, was the person that it was the road that we hadn't travelled down at that time. We had Solskjaer already. We'd given that stint to Van Nistelrooy, albeit I think for 4 or 5 games. But then he did go on to Leicester, and for all intents and purposes, that didn't work out. So that was almost a glimpse into what that might have turned out like, under Van Nistelrooy. But that being said, Michael Carrick since then has really, I guess, been the man who nobody expected to turn it around. He's beaten Man City, he's beaten Chelsea, Liverpool, Arsenal, and of course has secured Man United the Champions League qualification for next year, the first time in 3 seasons. So let's go into, let's rewind. Let's go into how Carrick has, come to this point now. Obviously, he retired in 2018, immediately was then drafted into Jose Mourinho's coaching staff. He then obviously, once Solskjaer took over, was a part of his coaching staff for 3 years. I think, given Mourinho aside, Solskjaer's team as a whole delivered the best league finish that we had seen in recent years, obviously since Sir Alex Ferguson's retirement. So that was almost like a check in the box for me. First off is that Solskjaer and Carrick, yes, they are ex-players, but I think they do have differing ideas when it comes to how the team should play. But that being said, the two heads together, albeit with Kieran McKenna there as well, did bring in a good amount of success. Overall, obviously, we did reach a Europa League final as well. So that being said, that was, again, a check in the box. Caretaker manager, of course, after Solskjaer was fired. He won Carrick 2 wins and 1 draw, most notably as well, won away at Villarreal, dropping Ronaldo for that game too. But then obviously he had to make that leap into a full-time position with a team that were trying to gun for championship titles in Middlesbrough. Now, of course, Carrick took over in October of 2022. Middlesbrough at the time were 21st in the table, a point above the relegation zone. Since he took over in that season, they won 16 of their first 23 games under Carrick, took them to the playoffs, but obviously fell at the final hurdle. However, after that, immaculate season, at least on Carrick's part, the 2 seasons after that didn't go tremendously well either. They finished 8th in the 2023-24 season, and then 10th in the 2024-25 season. So I will obviously go into that a bit more in detail later in the video, but that being said, is this kind of a trend that we might see with Carrick, but also what we saw with Solskjaer, that we, hit the heights in the first 6 months, first year, maybe even the first 18 months, but then kind of peter out. And that's also an argument that I'm going to bring to the table, is Carrick's tactics, really one that other opposition can easily adjust to and figure us out, over time. So let's go into it. So let's look back, over the last half of the season in which Carrick has been in charge. 15 games in total so far under Carrick, albeit with two more to go in this current season. 10 wins from 15 games, obviously notably Arsenal and Chelsea, City, Liverpool, and also Aston Villa at home. We did draw to Bournemouth, West Ham, Sunderland, and then picked up those two defeats at home to Leeds and then one away to Newcastle. Now, looking back at those games, I think it's what I've felt for a while with United, and maybe it is because of the departure of Sir Alex Ferguson, the standing of culture and of expectancy and standards. It's always been a kind of a chip on our shoulder that we've never really turned up against the smaller teams, and you're trying to be respectful there, but the smaller teams in a Bournemouth, a West Ham, a Leeds, for example, where yes, against Bournemouth we should have won given a few decisions if they went our way. West Ham at home, I remember, was a dreadful performance from start to finish. So was the Leeds result. Those kind of games, they still are current, in the way that against in Amarim's team, Ten Hag's team, Solskjaer's team, even Mourinho's team, we'd get up for the big games. We'd get up against for the Manchester derby, for Arsenal, for City, for Tottenham, but we couldn't somehow crawl over the line and get a smash and grab 3 points against those lowly teams, which is still a cause for concern to this day, even under Carrick, and the games that he's managed so far. Obviously, it is a smaller sample size than the other managers that we're talking about, but that trend is still going ahead, and it's one of those things that I hope, obviously, whether it's Carrick or whether it's another manager that comes in over the summer, that is something that is rectified, because ultimately, you have to take as many points as you can from any game. In the Premier League, especially when you look at how this season's gone. I believe, I'll probably go into it later in the video, but if Man United were consistent with the amount of points that they picked up, given what they did under Carrick over a full season, then we'd be in with a shout of the title, if not already crowned the champions, and we'd be on 86 points. So with that being said, if we do have that consistency and try and get more points against those lowly teams, then maybe we could be looking at a title fight next season. Obviously, there's so other many factors going into that, but it remains to be seen. But we still need to fix that issue of those performances against those smaller teams. Tactically, Michael Carrick, obviously, after the shambles that was Amarim, I think he did have the right intent. He wanted to, and was obviously given the keys to implement his own style. He obviously sold the board and Omar Barada and all the other key stakeholders in the United hierarchy of his decision and of his his kind of tactical philosophy, if you will, of that three in the back with the wing backs and the kind of the central two, with the two centre forwards as well. Ultimately, I think we didn't have the right personnel, evidently, to play that style. We're talking about a back three where, for teams that have played a back three, you need to have those two the two centre backs on the sides to be, first of all, mobile, to deal with inside runs from opposition wingers, but on the ball, you need them to be able to play with their feet, play at a good tempo to set the rhythm, but also to link the lines between the defence and the midfield, and obviously let them do their jobs and push on to create attacks. That being said, when you look at the centre-backs that we have at the club, we have Yoro, we have Aidan Heaven, Martinez, we have Harry Maguire, we have obviously Matthias de Ligt, who's obviously injured. I think you could argue Heaven and Yoro may fit that mould of being able to play at three at the back. However, is Yoro good enough with the ball at his feet? Aidan Heaven at that time when Amorim was there wasn't, old enough in terms of experience to be playing there, especially in, the kind of culture, or should I say the atmosphere that was around that team at the time. That being said, moving on to how Carrick has done the job, he didn't, I guess, lift up any trees in terms of tactical, his tweaks tactically. I think if any, well educated, I guess, invested Man United fan took charge of the team, we probably would have done tactically what Carrick did with the team, which was bring it back to basics. It was either a 4-2-3-1 or often a 4-3-3, depending on who we played. He put the players in the right positions, first of all, and that was clear as day to see. We had players such as, Amad Diallo on the right wing. We have players like Bruno Fernandes, probably most critically, playing in number 8, taking Mainoo's position, and obviously Mainoo being thrown to the side. He's brought it back to just playing that simple, effective Man United way. 2 left backs that, if one goes, the other stays and joins a back 3 defensively. Casemiro, who I think is, we've seen the best version of him, albeit given his age. We've seen the best version of him in the last year at Man United under Amorim or even under Carrick, and he was a pivotal part because he let Mainoo play, higher up but push on forward when he had the ball to his feet and to start those attacks, but also to link up with Bruno Fernandes, who obviously in his natural position of a number 10 was then able to do his damage, and we've obviously seen, given the assists, but also more importantly the chances created, that he was able to muster, along with linking up players like Cunha and Mbeumo and Šeško. Counter-attacking, that's what we like to see at Man United. We like to get the ball deep, have runners going forward at all angles and linking up play. That's the traditional Man United way, and having those quick transitions. But it seems like through reports online that Carrick has had a huge influence and a huge kind of focus in the training sessions with off the ball movement, which is exactly what we need. Just through the DNA of Man United, which I know is obviously a kind of almost a taboo topic nowadays, but it is true, because there's nothing that I've as a Man United fan, there's nothing more pleasing to see 3 attackers running on with, let's say, a Bruno Fernandes bombing forward with the ball and having 3 options open to him. That's how Man United should be playing, and I'm glad obviously Carrick has seen that and knows that is kind of what our foundation should be built upon. Given obviously our very good run in the Premier League and some of the performances were obviously top tier, there is obviously that argument that we only had one competition to play with. As a manager, giving you more time to prepare for each opposition obviously is the best case scenario for any manager, versus obviously the fixture congestion. And we always hear of Pep, and we obviously heard before of Jurgen Klopp, of the schedule being too kind of congested, and kind of really laying into the media how that affected their team in terms of rotation, but also in terms of preparation. But then obviously on the flip side, we're now qualified for the Champions League. On top of that, we'll obviously be in the Carabao Cup and the FA Cup, which of course we hope to have a longer run in than we did last time out. So that is one obviously question mark against Michael Carrick. It is the smaller sample size of games that he's managed under, but given the right recruitment, I think we should be able to muster somewhat of a respectable season. Now, going backwards for next year, going backwards would look like a group stage knockout or a first round of the knockout phases in the group phase, or the league phase, I should say, and not making it to those those kind of round of 16s or quarterfinals of the Champions League. Of course, naturally, as Man United, we should get past the first round of the third round of the FA Cup and the first round of the Carabao Cup that we get drawn into. We should be doing better than that, but then ultimately Premier League is of course the be all and end all. No one expects us to win the Champions League. I don't think anyone expects us to win the Premier League next season. However, given the uncertainty with Pep at City, the uncertainty at Chelsea, which way are they going to go? Reportedly, Xabi Alonso's coming in, which for me is a good hire. And if it wasn't for his Liverpool links, I would like him at Man United. Seeing what he did at Leverkusen and turned them as a team on a dime to fit his tactical prowess and to really implement his standards into that team. But that being said, throughout this season, given the good results against the bigger teams, there were some dreadful performances after that kind of tremendous run that we went on. Again, like I mentioned, West Ham at home, it was lackluster. I think I remember it was a rainy, dark night at Old Trafford, and it was just so somber in terms of the tempo of play. West Ham, had ultimately just turned up and just got Man United and got the players on their bad day. Even at against Leeds, at the time, Leeds weren't kind of down and out in terms of relegation, and they weren't safe either. So we knew they had to bring in a performance. And that was a terrible performance as well. And we were kind of dominated from their press with Calvert-Lewin, Okafor pressing us, Aronson as well, who's a very pacey player, causing us problems when the defence had the ball at their feet. And that's ultimately what we got caught out on, which again is another point regarding Carrick is how will he tweak the team tactically for when those teams, any team, could be a Leeds, but also could be a Liverpool or a City that come in and start to press us straight from the get-go, straight on the defensive line and pin us back into our final third. What are we going to do and how are our outlets going to look like, going into next season? So, let's kind of look at this from two perspectives because I am diplomatic in this kind of way of thinking about managers. There is obviously a lot of emotional connection from me to Man United as a club, as a team that I've watched all my life, but you kind of generate these relationships with players, you get these kind of innate relationships with managers, and you start to buy into what they believe in, obviously through hearing them in interviews and press conferences. But for me, Carrick is one that he hasn't personally sold me yet as a Man United manager, but I do think we'd be making a questionable decision if we don't at least give him next season to see how he handles, the pressure of going into a new season. It's his team now. He would have had a whole pre-season to stamp his authority and his plans into the team. So going into kind of the pros, why should we consider Michael Carrick as manager and why should we continue with him? So, like I said, he's shifted United back to a United style, I should say, a type of attacking play. He's given Mbeumo, Cunha, Bruno the freedom to play with that stability in behind, with Casemiro across the back four, often dropping into centre back when required, but giving Mainu the license to kind of roam with the ball and help connect the wingers and obviously the fullbacks as well. For all intents and purposes with Carrick and bringing back to the basics, we would have thought that he wouldn't have had the flexibility in game, especially to be able to tweak tactically. But we did see against Man City and we saw against Arsenal the tactics and the players that he brought in, into the game in those situations to get the win. And he should be given his flowers for what he did there. Obviously, it requires the players as individuals to have moments of brilliance like Dorgu, like Cunha's goal against Arsenal, for example. But he did have that nous to be able to tweak things tactically, but also that confidence, because in both of those games, I'm sure as a Michael Carrick, you're looking across the sideline and you've got Mikel Arteta to your side and you've got Pep Guardiola. It could obviously be very intimidating in terms of, should I stick with what I know or should I tweak things and try and change it to where they don't expect us to be? So that, he's got to be given his props in that regard. Stability, again, I think with the defensive line and the defensive stability that Carrick's been able to input into this team. He's got to be given, a good amount of credit for this as well, especially given the injuries that we've had. Delict, for whatever it is now. I mean, it's reportedly his back, but we just don't know for certain the recovery time, or even if he's going to be able to play again. It seems like something that is on the hush hush, for want of a better term, in the club, and only Carrick, Delit, and I'm sure obviously the coaching staff know what is going on there. But given the injuries to those guys, but also the poor form of Lenny Yoro, for example, I mean, I expected a much better season from him this time round. He was able to implement a good amount of stability with Harry Maguire and Aiden Heaven and Martinez coming in here and there as well. And I think we did see a good amount of a good amount of good performances from those guys. I mean, Harry Maguire, I'll go into it obviously on my England video when we talk about the potential squad to go to the World Cup, but he's had an immense season. I do think he is coming into that twilight phase there or thereabouts, where he might get a little bit slower and find it a bit more harder to adjust to the pace of the Premier League as his years go on. I'm not saying he's there right now, but we do feel it in our own heads, just him as a player and what we know him to be, to potentially have that issue. But should he become like a Thiago Silva type of player, where he becomes a bit more smarter in the way he shapes his body, or gives himself a few more yards against opposition over the coming future seasons, that would be great to see. But given that being said, I don't obviously think Harry Maguire is going to be a starting centre-back for Man United, for, I guess, the foreseeable future. I don't think he'll be our starting centre-back next season. But depending on the recruitment, depending on Matthijs de Ligt, that it could be a possibility as well. So I think with the merry-go-round of the centre-backs that we've had, Michael Carrick's done well to implement that kind of stability, which has obviously been the foundation for us to kind of kick on forward in an attacking sense. Statistically, Amorim, goals conceded, we have 1.51 per game versus 1.09 under Solskjaer and a 1.14 under Michael Carrick. So a significant difference in that sense compared to Amorim, but obviously a smaller sample size. We did score more goals than we conceded in the league for the second time in 5 seasons, which I thought was a incredible stat, considering Man United and the expectations that we have on us every season. It's, goes without saying, we've not been there or anywhere near where we should be over the last 5 years, and that goes without saying with that stat right there. Like, this is the first time we've scored more goals than we've conceded. So props to Michael Carrick on the defensive end, but also giving them the attacking freedom. However, that being said, I think he had, he was playing with pieces of gold with Cunha and Bumo and Bruno, and obviously Sesko as well. And that is another point for me. Sesko is seeming to be a player now where obviously Michael Carrick didn't throw him into the starting 11 in those first few games. He obviously worked with him on the training ground. He told him to bide his time. His chances will come. And Sesko has taken his chances when he's been on the pitch, and he's done very well. Even when he hasn't scored, he's looked a lot better than Højlund in terms of his hold-up play, his overall presence on the pitch, and being able to link up players, with the wingers and with Bruno. Because I remember so many times where Højlund would get the ball back to goal and would either get the ball poked from under him and would lose the ball, would fall to the ground, and it doesn't feel like that way with Sesko. I really do have a good feeling about Benjamin Sesko as a whole, in a Man United shirt for sure. Going into a few more points for Michael Carrick, I mean, he's been good with young talent so far with Man United since the turn of the year. Obviously, Kobbie Mainoo's return, risen from the ashes under his terrible time under Amorim. Aidan Heaven as well had a stellar second half of the season for me. Looked like one of our shining lights, and he's just seems to be an absolute bargain at £1 million from Arsenal. And I hope he does kick on to become a pivotal part of the defensive line, if not next season, then definitely in the seasons to come. However, obviously at Middlesbrough and Michael Carrick's time there, he did oversee a good amount of young talent, most notably Morgan Rogers, who they signed for that season, and that was his one and only season, but it was a breakout season for Morgan Rogers, which deserved him his move to Aston Villa. Hayden Hackney is another player who has had a lot of media hype recently after his performance this season in the Championship at Middlesbrough. He was also coming through the team and became an important part of that midfield for Michael Carrick. So I think, given what United need in a manager, in black and white, we need a manager that understands the academy, that understands the DNA of Man United in bringing through young players, and if they're good enough, then they're old enough. And I really do think that we might not get a team full of academy products, but I do think Michael Carrick will give them their deserved chance. And we did obviously see players like Shea Lacey come through for some substitute appearances once kind of Amorim left. And, I'm sure obviously a few others such as JJ Gabriel will come on into the fold next season. And at least see a few minutes across the span of the league season. I think Michael Carrick, away from the tactics and away from his performance as manager, he is strong in the media. He's straight to the point. He's honest. When we look at kind of referees' decisions against Bournemouth, for example, he was very open in his post-match interview in that regard. Compared to Amorim, I mean, he's been a breath of fresh air. There's no metaphors with him. There's no playing about with the media about players and telling a player that they're, when they see the ball at a player's feet, they get nervous, like Amorim did with Patrick Dorgu. There's none of that scapegoating for Michael Carrick, I don't think. I mean, at least obviously we've not seen any terrible situations where he's had to relate to that, but I don't think he's that kind of guy. I think he knows what, as a manager, you have to represent Man United as a team and as a franchise in the correct way. And, if you do start attacking players, then that's only going to go in one way. Then that leads me nicely onto my next point, is that the culture seems to be back in the dressing room, and the players buying into Michael Carrick. Casemiro being one. I mean, obviously he is leaving at the end of the season, but as a player, as a professional, who else would you want in this type of situation to give you praise? And he's obviously been recognising Carrick's attributes and saying that he looks like a United mould of manager. Mainu, Bruno, Maguire, the key figures in our team, have also come out and been very positive about Michael Carrick. They've labelled him as a calm individual, which is obviously something we want to see. Amorim was very animated at times, whether it be on the touchline, whether it be in the media. And I think, when you look at the managers, not just for Man United, for Ferguson or for whoever, you've got to have a cool head on your shoulders as Man United manager. There's no two ways about that. And then I would say penultimately for my pros for Michael Carrick, the other options of managers, it's looking pretty bleak. I mean, for the three that I would even consider, Iraola, Unai Emery, and Luis Enrique, they all have question marks against them. So Iraola, obviously he's from the Basque Country in Spain. He was expected to go back to Bilbao to manage them. That hasn't happened, and now he might be looking at either Chelsea or Crystal Palace, which seems like Crystal Palace seems like a bit of a backwards step, or even like a plateaued step compared to where he's coming from in Bournemouth. So that one is looking a bit bleak. However, he does have that Premier League experience more so than Michael Carrick, which is why I thought he'd be a better option than Carrick potentially. Unai Emery and Luis Enrique for me are probably the top two choices that we have probably got shortlisted on this list. Unai Emery's obviously done a tremendous job at Aston Villa, albeit coming off of the back of his tenure at Arsenal. It never really seemed to get going for him. But was he given a fair crack of the whip? Was he given all the keys that he needed to do his job? We don't know. it seems at Aston Villa that he might have, he's built them up to be Champions League or Europa League contenders, but also consistently in that top six, top seven in terms of finishes in the Premier League. And he looks like a manager that is pragmatic when he needs to be. However, I do have some feelings about Unai Emery where, even that game against Tottenham where he fielded a very weak starting 11, for Aston Villa still, they aren't dead certain on qualifying for Champions League. So I would have thought Unai Emery in a game like that would have put in at least his best players for the first half just to try and get the game finished. But credit in that game against Tottenham that Tottenham showed up and got that win unexpectedly. Luis Enrique for me is probably the number one choice. Obviously for what he's done at PSG, what he did at Barcelona, he's been near enough immaculate in his managerial record. There are reports that he is going to sign a new contract after the Champions League final for PSG, so that one might be off the table as well. Overall, I guess to finish off the pros, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. I think if we give Carrick a full season, like I mentioned previously, we'd be on course for about 86, 87 points. Obviously, that is kind of all hypothetical at the end of the day. However, it does show us that he is in the right direction. It's not a ship that is destined to be sinking. He's brought stability into the team, as I've previously mentioned. And one example for me that does give me good feelings about Michael Carrick is the comparison to him and Arteta. Now, Arteta obviously came under the coaching tree of people like David Moyes and Arsene Wenger, but then moving into under Pep Guardiola. So he's had a great deal of different experiences and picking up different things. And we've obviously seen over the past 6 or 7 years where the past 5 or 6 years where he's been able to take Arsenal as a team. And that for me, as a comparison to where Michael Carrick's from, is pretty linear. Michael Carrick came in under Mourinho, then Solskjaer, but then also got his kind of fair chance under Middlesbrough, albeit it didn't end the way he would have wanted. But for me, Michael Carrick, is it a situation where does he need better tools to operate, for what the philosophy he has, in order to operate at a consistent but strong level? That being said, again, the comparison between him and Arteta, I think, is again another tick in the box. It gives me confidence that maybe we should hand the keys on to someone that isn't a big name, like an Enrique or an Emery. Obviously, financially, they would cost a lot more than Michael Carrick, I'm sure, would as well. And, that kind of uncertainty is maybe a positive in that light, which is, again, a good feeling for me. So, on to the negatives. After Amorim, it couldn't have gotten much worse. There was got to be an inevitable bounce after he finished. Michael Carrick's start versus Ole Gunnar Solskjaer's start was very similar as well. So Solskjaer got 14 wins in his first 19 games, similar to Michael Carrick's 10 wins in 15 games. It was slightly predictable in terms of output from our attacking players, especially our reliance on possession, like we saw against those teams that were pressing us. It often did put us into a bit of trouble, and being able to replace those key players that are very important to that system of reliance on possession, such as Casemiro and De Ligt, should he return, is again another question mark. Maybe even half on the recruitment side, but also half on Michael Carrick and his identification of a player that can fulfill that role, from Casemiro and even in the centre-back spot, replacing De Ligt. Those kind of managerial options that I mentioned, do they have a lot more experience? Yes, they do. Are they better options because of it? Remains to be seen. Obviously, Enrique, he would be my front runner, my number one. I would put a contract on his table right now if I was in charge. But obviously, we don't know what he's going to do with his time at PSG. Maybe is that why Man United are waiting? Maybe have they heard some signals from his camp suggesting that he's not 100% decided on his future in Paris. The overall recruitment that we've seen recently especially under Ten Hag, has been diabolical. And for me, knowing what we know now, and hoping that Ineos have learnt from their mistakes as well, such as bringing in players like Joshua Zirkzee, for example. Hopefully, can they give Michael Carrick the foundation of players and the depth and the quality of players that we need to be competitive across all four competitions? Does Michael Carrick have that pull as a manager to bring in those names that we need in order to do that? That is again another question. Whereas maybe an Unai Emery or an Enrique may have a bit more pull and be able to bring in better players or players that already know the system that they're going into. Michael Carrick at Middlesbrough, I mean, he had 2.5 seasons. His points per game were 1.57, which, if you're one of the top teams in that league, that's probably a lot less than what you want to get over the course of a season. It was clear looking back at the results that they endured that they couldn't sustain too much momentum. It was always a few wins here and then a kind of a pitter patter of draws and losses mixed in, and it was never one that kind of gave Middlesbrough fans after that first season under Carrick any conviction that he is the right guy. And that's why, again, I bring up that point where maybe his coaching style and from his experiences as a player, are they more tailored to players at the top level, such as the Premier League, or does he not have those kind of ways tactically to be able to change when and if required with the players at his disposal? Secondly, and finally, should I say, with the team that we have now, I mean, for everything that I've said about Ruben Amorim in terms of his diabolical way of communicating in the press, his tactics overall, his ineptness to adjust, or rather his ignorance to not adjust his team, Amorim did do a very good job at starting to gut out the deadwood or the poisonous ivy, if you will, of the team, like a Garnacho, like an Anthony. It was evident, obviously, from the time under Ten Hag, and you hear about, even I remember listening to Steve McLaren in an interview where he talked about how Ronaldo and Ten Hag kind of butted heads, and Ten Hag at the end of the day, it seemed like he was pretty not stern, I guess, not as stern as you'd want in a manager. Obviously, he did have that fallout with Rashford when he went on to Belfast to have a little party. But aside from that, he let Garnacho become the type of person that we know he is now. Anthony, not even the way, I mean, in the press or outside of off the pitch, he was fine from what I know, but on the pitch, it seemed like he was kind of taking the piss a bit, the way he played. And yes, Ten Hag managed him at Ajax, and that brought him some success, whether it be the Champions League or the Dutch League, but that doesn't fly in a Man United shirt. It doesn't fly in the Premier League. And it seems like Ten Hag didn't have that kind of authority, that stamp of authority to be able to kind of have guys looking at him when he's being spoken to. That being said, Amorim started to gut out the squad. Will Carrick continue that trend and being able to identify the players that don't fit the mold of not just tactically, but as a professional, as a man manager that we've not seen too much of recently? I mean, Solskjaer was probably more of a man manager than anyone that we've had recently, and he was kind of being backed up tactically by Kieran McKenna. But will Carrick have that conviction to be able to say to a person or a player, you're not continuing with us, and really kind of stamping his authority, should he kind of have a good relationship with the board as well to be able to do that? So overall, I mean, for me, if it was my decision, I would say let's continue with Michael Carrick. I think, again, overall, Carrick has done a tremendous job in the tenure that he's had since the turn of the year to come in, again, like I said, go back to basics, get the players playing football the Man United way, obviously as cliche as that is, it is our DNA, and it's something that we need to celebrate rather than try and change. Because with Amarim, it was a total failure with the way he tactically set up, and we should never have thought that it would work in the Premier League, but even with the players at our disposal. And I do think United are slowly starting to turn a corner, less so about our kind of progress in the league and other competitions. I do think since Amarim took over, the overall feeling of the squad after the departures that happened were for the best and were for the better. Getting rid of Anthony, Højlund, Garnacho, even Marcus Rashford. As much as I love Marcus Rashford, I think the time has come that we try and sell up to Barcelona. I don't think we need to get him onto another loan, but if he wants that move, then he should find the way to financially make it work. But I do think, as much as I would love to see Marcus Rashford on the left wing in a Man United shirt again, I do think it's the ship has sailed, and that we need to kind of start to not rely on these, kind of these thoughts and these kind of past experiences and past moments with players like Marcus Rashford and trying to latch onto them. We just need to cut the umbilical cord and continue with how we're going. The culture that's forming, I think having players and senior players like Harry Maguire, Bruno, Casemiro, obviously I'm sure they've done a tremendous job in terms of their leadership group and being able to bring the club together as a whole. But with them kind of at the top of the piece, having players like Mainu, Sene Lamens, you could throw Diego Dalot in there as well. As much as I'm not his biggest fan, I know he's a pivotal part of kind of how United play, but also from a personal standpoint, he seems like an absolute professional, and it's someone that you would want around that club. Always speaks well in the media as well. But then those types of players being able to nurture the Mainus, the Sene Lamens of this world, that's really what gives me a good feeling about this team, and hopefully turning a corner away from where we saw ourselves under Amarim in terms of league position, for example. Bruno Fernandes, I mean, is it one last dance with him? Will we have is this coming season, next season, is that going to be the season where this is kind of his final go at trying to win a title with Man United, trying to win a Champions League or an FA Cup or a Carabao Cup? Just let's try and give him the best season that we can, and he needs, of all players, he needs the players around him to be able to perform well, but most importantly, he needs a good environment to be able to perform well as well. And I think we've seen that under Michael Carrick. I think obviously Carrick knows how important Bruno is, as does everyone. But being able to keep the rest of the players happy, but also buying into the way that Michael Carrick wants to be playing, with Bruno as his most pivotal player. Being youth heavy, he's definitely for the youth and bringing in players and giving them stretches of games to prove themselves, like Aiden Heaven, for example. That shows me a great deal of confidence that Michael Carrick has in those players, but also not fearing putting those players in, especially in key games, in key moments. I think, especially looking at the last two managers that we've seen in Ten Hag and Amarim before Carrick, out of all of them knows what it takes to win a Premier League, and ultimately that is our main goal. He's been there as a player countless times under one of the best managers ever. He knows how to operate as a Man United player. He knows what's demanded. He knows how they should conduct themselves away off the pitch, for example. So I think he will be a real standard setter in that regard. The Arteta effect, I've labelled it here, but like I said prior, Arteta not having that experience, albeit under people like Pep Guardiola, no one really thought, 6 years fast forward, that he'd be in the position where he is right now, with Arsenal potentially winning, a European Cup in the Champions League, and obviously winning the title. Is Carrick of that same build? Is he of that same cut of cloth where Arteta has, been given the keys ultimately, or has worked in tandem with the recruitment team to be able to build this foundation and build these players into the system that we see today. And finally, I do think the door is open for Man United. Again, like I mentioned previously in this video, City are, in terms of player, personnel, quality, they've got it all. Arsenal, probably the same. Aside from those guys, obviously there's uncertainty with Liverpool, but I should say uncertainty with Pep. Is he going to go at the end of this season? If it doesn't all go well, or is he going to stay on for one more season? Arne Slot, a lot of Liverpool fans are calling for his head. Where will they be? Chelsea might be bringing in Xabi Alonso, where those Liverpool fans were thinking Alonso was going to them, but instead going to Chelsea. Newcastle under Eddie Howe, will he be staying there? Will they be a force to be reckoned with, or will they peter out? Will the funding from PIF be pulled? So many question marks on that end. Villa under Emery, how far can he take them? Is this the furthest they go? Is there a cap? There's so many teams in the league, and Arsenal as well, where as they deserve the Premier League title. If they win it, they do deserve it ultimately, because they've been strongest of the 20 teams defensively and attacking sense, and they've gotten the results when they need to, so they ultimately do deserve it. But I don't think next season will be as easy for them. City will come back. Liverpool, I'm sure, will come back. But Man United, why not Man United to really get amongst it? Yes, we've finished third this season, but we need another high place finish, if not going into a deep title charge, to really stamp our, to say, ultimately we are back as a club. Whether it be the league position, whether it be how we, how we recruit and the kind of the standards we set of ourselves as a team, I do think that opportunity is there to be grasped with both hands. And Ineos, Michael Carrick, and all the players and all the staff there, they need to make sure this summer is one that ticks all the boxes. There's no stone left unturned. We take out all of the wood that needs to be taken out, and if everything goes well, we could be really onto something special. So let's hope so, guys. That's for me. It's a tough decision. Obviously, it's not one to be made lightly. In a ideal setting, I would love a Luis Enrique to come in, but we've seen in times before, bringing in a big name doesn't always mean big results. So I do hope Michael Carrick gets the job. I do hope he gets given the chance, and let's see how next season goes. But ultimately, we should expect at least a top 4 finish, given what is going on around the league and what could happen over the summer. So that's all for today, guys. I do appreciate it. It's obviously been a long one, but a lot of information in there. Give me your thoughts and feelings down below. Comment what you think should happen. Should Carrick stay? If he does, who do you think he's going to bring in? And like the video, share the video, and I'll catch you back next time for a preview and predict video, this time for game week 37, and then obviously a whole host of World Cup content to come in the next few weeks as well. So thank you for tuning in, and goodbye.